I actually heard Gustavo Dudamel recently, who just announced he's leaving the Los Angeles
Yes.
Philharmonic, suggesting that you replace him.
Yes, joking he was, but it was so great to be in dialogue with Dudamel. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, what an incredible. Forget being an incredible maestro, incredible musician, but he's an incredible human being.
Right.
And he was so generous in his response to the film. You know, it meant the world to us.
Okay. Good.
Welcome to the Actor's Side. Today, well, first of all, she's a creature of the theater. So many great performances on stage, but in the movies, she's a major movie star with 8 Academy Award nominations to her name, the most recent one being Tar. But you look at this list: Carol, Blue Jasmine, Elizabeth the Golden Age, I'm Not There, Notes on a Scandal, Aviator. Elizabeth, 2 Oscars, so much acclaim. It's amazing. Welcome, Cate Blanchett.
Thank you.
And congratulations on Tar, of course, which is just, I saw it at Telluride at the very first screening there when you guys came out and did the Q&A after. I was just like, oh, let me take this movie in. This is...
That's great. Yeah, I mean, that was my experience of reading the script for the first time. Is I thought, this is so much to absorb.
Yeah.
You know, like it's a really dense film, but then in the end, it's directed with such buoyancy.
Right.
You know, and it's wickedly funny too. So I think it's discombobulating for an audience because they don't quite know where to sit with it, which has been so exciting for us to be part of that conversation with an audience.
I could tell when you were talking about it, and that was very early on in this very long season that we're in of 5-6 months. But right there, it was so fascinating to me because you all seemed like you were trying to grasp it yourself at that point, and audience reaction to it.
I mean, it's a film about process, and we asked, I think the film does as well, so many questions, and the film asks more questions than it answers.
Right.
So Todd and I, said to one another really early on that the process of talking about it would be to try and, as much as possible, to be in dialogue with an audience to help them tell us what the movie was about, because there's been so many different readings of it, I've never been part of something quite like it, to be honest.
Which is amazing. And when I read off all those credits, and that was just a drop in the bucket, those names you've done, when you get a script like this that he wrote specifically for you, I think there's a lot of pressure on that. Oh my God, he wrote it for you. What if you don't like it? But
well, I mean, Todd didn't tell me that at the time. Thank goodness. I mean, we talked about working together about 10, 12 years ago, and we hadn't stayed in touch. But when I knew a script of his was coming, in my brain I'd already said yes.
Really?
Because it's, in the end, whether you play a large role or a small role, it's about the quality of conversation with the director, and then of course the other actors that you're working with. But I knew that I would love to be on a film set with Todd. I've learned so much from him, so much. I'm still unpacking it.
Are you really?
Yeah, definitely.
It's amazing, 16 years between feature films for him.
He's very particular. He's very particular. Yeah. I mean, oftentimes we all do it, we want to be busy, but he feels unless he has the chance to make something in the way that you know he hopes, he's prepared to let things go.
Yeah.
So he's quite sanguine about it, and this one just came together quite quickly. And I think he had so much freedom from focus to, you know, as to how to place the character, how to craft it. There were no kind of notes. They were really great partners with him in the development process. They really let him have his head.
But you really threw yourself into this in the prep period. I think you just went. He said he's never seen an actor go to that distance.
Right. Well, there was so
even
much
memorizing
to do.
everybody else's lines and everything.
But you sort of do that when you're on stage. I mean, you talk about being a theatre actor. Is that there's a kind of a game that you play, a warm-up game you play with other actors, where you throw a line into the space and someone picks it up, and you kind of need to know the rhythm of the scene. So invariably over the course of rehearsing for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever you do in the theatre, you do end up knowing the whole. And so that's just in my DNA. And because reading the screenplay, it made rhythmic sense before it made psychological sense to me. So it was written musically. Yeah. And so to know that you're playing with Noémie Merlan and Nina Hoss, the great Nina Hoss, and Sophie Kauer, who's a cellist and who happens also to be an extraordinary actress. This is the first time she'd acted. That it was like a rhythmic dance. And I did have a lot of dialogue, but there was a lot of unspoken textures in the scenes, you know, that were really, those pauses, those breaths that were really important. So that in order to get to the place where you could play that music, you know, the vocal music, I just had to get on top of a lot of stuff so that people would believe that, you know, the character was who she said she was. She was a maestro.
Did you obviously studied other conductors, maestros like that. Do you use YouTube or things? I talk to actors and they think that's the greatest invention ever, because you can just sort of find everybody, you know, if you're studying.
Well, look, also preparing for this during the pandemic, when all the orchestras had shut down, that musicians weren't able to play these great concert works. I wasn't able to go and watch people rehearse or perform these great symphonic works. So yes, it was. And Ilya Musin, who's one of the great conducting masters, I thought, where do I start? I have to start with the beating. I have to start with the music. Right. And so he has given all these incredible library masterclasses online. So I can say I was mentored by Ilya Musin. You know.
Why not? Yeah. I actually heard Gustavo Dudamel recently, who just announced he's leaving the Los Angeles Philharmonic, suggesting that you replace him.
Yes, joking he was. But it was so great to be in dialogue with Dudamel. You know, I mean, what an incredible, forget being an incredible maestro, incredible musician, but he's an incredible human being. Right. And he was so generous in his response to the film. You know, it meant the world to us.
This is such an interesting, you play so many different interesting characters. Some people will say it's risky, you know, the audience, will they have empathy for her? I did. I sort of watched her. I just thought she was so interesting and so into what she wanted to do, and everything else in this world today that we live in here gets in the way.
Yeah, it's interesting when even still, women are expected to be, if they're at the center of a narrative, they're meant to educate us, they're meant to be noble, they're meant to be fine and self-sacrificing and full of grace and generosity and bravery. You know, but there's a flip side to being a woman, which is part of being a human being, is that we're flawed. We do unpredictable and unpalatable things, particularly when no one's watching, just like the men do. But yet we don't talk about whether a male character is empathetic or whether we have sympathy for them. Right. And I think it was because the film is it's many things, but because it examines systemic power. Right. I think having a woman at the head of that, it's still a fairy tale. I mean, there isn't a woman at the head of any great European.
Orchestra, right?
Well, no, Natalie Stutzman's just taken over in Atlanta, which is incredible, and there are
so we got
many.
One.
No, but I mean, really, the statistics are appalling. Yeah. Particularly when you look at the talent pool. But it's still, we don't still in our everyday lives, minute by minute, understand what many women at the head of organizations look like. We've never had anything approaching a matriarchy.
Right.
So I think with a woman at the center of this narrative, it gives more nuance to the examination of systemic power.
Did it help? You ran a theater company with your husband, I believe, you know, and that's administrative, that's all that stuff, that's everything that goes in. Did that particular personal experience help you at all?
Definitely. I mean, we were co-artistic directors and co-CEOs of the Sydney Theatre Company, which is the largest of the state theatre companies in Australia. Right. And I realised, I mean, we did it in partnership. I don't understand how to work unless it's collaborative, you know, and so we brought that to it just because simply there were two of us. But even so, I realised how lonely it is. You know, it's there's not a lot of people that you can share the minutiae, the compromises that you have to make. You want to be able to support everybody, but you've got a finite amount of resources, so you're always letting somebody down. You know, like it's and also being responsible. How do you balance emerging artists with mid-career, with established artists, and you know. We had we're called a state theatre company, but we have next to no government funding. But yet, because we're the largest of the state companies, we had to have a certain position in the theatrical ecology. There's a lot of expectations from within the community. So all of that stuff, it was great cause for reflection for me in so many ways about things that I'd done in the past, but also realizing even though you're at a certain position in your career, you can never assume that you know anything about anything.
Right.
You know, whenever you start something, whether it's conducting Mahler's Fifth Symphony, playing Hedda Gabler, or playing Lydia Tar, you always have to start from scratch. Yeah. And the process of finding out what the film is, what the role even means within that, is you find that out together. You know, and so it was a real reminder of the collective process that we make these things in.
Speaking of Mahler, didn't you have to make you do a whole Dresden orchestra? You had to go out there and conduct it.
One of the most terrifying moments of my life.
I cannot imagine how terrifying that would be. That was amazing.
And also because I knew, having watched documentaries and speaking to people, is that an orchestra smells insecurity or inauthenticity, and you can lose them immediately. So I just had to get up on the podium and, in my bad schoolgirl German, say, you know, thank you for their patience, and that I had to rehearse and we had to rehearse, and that we were going to find our way together. And of course they had to act. And they were extraordinary. So we were both outside our comfort zones, and it was remarkable. I mean, who would have thought when I came out of drama school that I'd be making music with the Dresden Philharmonic? It is not something I thought I would ever experience, being at the epicenter of that sound. But, you know, it's not a film about conducting, you know, but to be at the center of that sound, even in the rehearsal parts that we did, was just magnificent.
This film's about many things too. You know, they say cancel culture, all of those things that we're dealing with now. As this, it's got a lot of interesting themes running through it. It's not an easy, you know, just paint it simply kind of movie. This is very complex.
There's a lot to digest, and I think the wonderful thing about it is that the people who have had nothing to do with classical music, may never have listened to it before, have seen the movie 2, 3, 4 times, you know, because they keep unlocking a different pocket of it. It's quite a dense but rewarding, you know, experience. But we knew that it would be released into quite a volatile environment. Yeah. So it's I think it does speak to all of that social censure and that kind of that we're all experiencing, that self-censorship. You know, and the performative nature of social media, you know, but it's like the mobile phone when that was introduced into film. It changed the way we delivered narrative, you know, and so with this one, we cannot help but lean into the cancel culture end of it, because that is the world in which we're living. But of course, that's not what the film is about either. You know,
but it's like it's a fascinating kind of side thing there that comes out of it when you look at this movie and everything that's going on. And when you mentioned before, you know, what women are expected of here and everything, I heard somebody say, well, there's so many male conductors that this would have applied to more. Why didn't they just make it a male conductor? And I go, no, you know, this is really an interesting choice to make it her. You know, and I don't think I would use the word predator. I think it's much beyond that, but, you know.
Yeah, I think in a way your Lydia Tar is somebody who has been running from her own shadow,
Yeah.
and set in a world of incredible discipline and control, which is how you make classical music. You don't even get to be part of those orchestras unless you have been practicing for 8-10 hours a day for your entire life. Yeah. And I think that rigor and that discipline has made her rather inept at life and very separated from herself. And as you say, running a major organization, she's estranged from herself, and she's about to turn 50. Yeah. She's coming to the end of a teaching cycle. And I think that there is a self-destructing quality inside her that she knows in order to push through to the next layer, she almost has to self-combust.
Right.
And that's what you have to do as an artist. So there's a kind of an artistic metaphor. But, I think in a way she becomes, maybe her fatal flaw is that she looks at the world through her own prism. Mm-hmm. So she looks at this young cellist and identifies with her. Yeah. I think in a way, as you move into your mid to late career, you look at younger people and imagine yourself into their experience. Yeah. And of course, Olga is a very contemporary, modern construct. Sure. And an entirely different artist to her. And so when we start to assume that somebody else's experience is our own experience, and when we try and deny our shadow self, I think it's a really dangerous space. So we find her in quite a dangerous kind of prison of her own making. Yeah.
And it's your own piano playing. You don't have a double there with the piano.
No. I mean, we had to, with Todd in this particular sequence, the character's composing a piece at the same time she's trying to prepare to conduct Mahler's Fifth. So she's stretched quite thinly. But all of the music is diegetic, even though I said to him, well, you can't see my fingers. And he said, yeah, well. But it's a teaching moment. It's not about a pianist. But yes, it was important that
that is amazing to me.
It was a joy. It was an absolute joy to play the piano. I had learned as a girl, and to go home. It was quite a hermetic life I was leading. I'd go home, I'd play the piano to unwind, I would, learn my lines and practice the conducting bit, and then go back into work and come home and play the piano and practice. It was,
Let me ask you this. I may have seen a movie that did this before, but I can't remember. All the credits run, and this is in the modern age of credits, not the old movies that had credits at the beginning. This has every credit.
It goes from the Dolby signal at the bottom and backwards.
The whole thing, which was so interesting and kind of shocking to see at the beginning of a movie.
But that's how meticulous Todd is as a filmmaker, because of course the film is at its essence, it's also about time.
Yeah.
And our, Lydia and all of our feeling that we could somehow control time. We can stop it when we want. We can change up the rhythm, and we're not in control of time.
Right.
If we can be in control of many things, but we are not in control of time. Yeah. And so he discombobulates the audience and runs time backwards, even from the very first frame of the credits.
So fascinating, that I am always the last one. Even as a critic, I love going to movies with real people, that actually pay. Mm. And I still am the last person sitting in the audience because I like to read every last credit. So that to me was just, a way of keeping the audience. Now you're going to look at those credits.
Yeah.
You're going to see them.
Yes. And it also gives time for people to sort of unwind from their experience and lean in a bit and think, what is this?
Yeah.
And also because the movie is so top heavy with language and becomes increasingly silent.
Yeah.
That's
amazing too.
Yeah.
I also love the fact that you do an interview as Lydia in that movie. It's fascinating to kind of watch. You learn everything about her and nothing about her.
Yes.
From that.
Yes, I mean, she's somebody who's very, as we all do, there's a performative aspect to being here right now.
Right, that's what I was
suddenly going to get really subconscious. but we do think that we can control our image.
Right.
And you realize that with a lot of, public people and conductors in particular, their reputation cements their ability to be able to play certain works.
Right.
People expect them to be a certain way. You know, their hair, the way they dress themselves, the way they present, their style, you know, the way they talk about their work. It's all part of cementing their legacy. So, of course, that is a deep concern to Lydia, as it is to all of the male conductors over, you know, over classical music history.
That's amazing. Is this your favorite role, movie role? I would think, I've seen so many different things you've done and things. I don't know how you pick, but this is such an extraordinarily different kind of role that doesn't come along that often, I would think.
No, I mean, it's bittersweet for me because I always think about the role in a way, it's the last point of entry. I knew as soon as I knew the script was coming that I wanted to be in the film because of Todd, of course. And then I read it, and then I got terrified. And then the process of, I said, well, I've got to do this and this and this and this in order to be worthy of stepping onto the set with him and be able to do my job.
Sure.
But it was one of my favorite experiences, to be sure. And I think the wonderful detritus of it is, it's still here and I still haven't unpacked it, you know? Like I feel like when you get to play these extraordinary roles, you feel expanded by it. And not only do you get to find out a pocket of human existence that you didn't know the minutiae of, you know, which I did, and that was a privilege. It's you get to work with people who the conversation is, I mean, he's so much smarter and knows so much more about cinema than I do. And so I feel very, very expanded by that collaboration in ways that are very, very special.
There was something I saw. I think you went to the Criterion Collection when you talk about knowing about cinema.
Yeah.
I watched it. It's on
YouTube.
Yeah.
Funny that.
But it's you and Todd let loose. My dream, by the way, let loose in a warehouse of DVDs.
Oh God, isn't that every cinephile's dream?
It was really, and it was fascinating to see the ones you lit up your eyes there, you know, and him too, you know, grabbing those, because you got to take anything you wanted, which was pretty amazing.
Isn't that wonderful? No, but to talk about him and talk with Todd about various different scenes or filmmakers or you know, moments in cinema that we loved and remembered. And the wonderful thing about that, I don't know if you find this, but often I'll be describing a moment from a film that I've loved. Yeah. And then I'll say to my kids, we've got to watch this movie.
Right.
And you know, it might have been something that I watched when I was 12 or when I was 20. Yeah. And say, for example, Death in Venice.
Yeah.
And I went back to Death in Venice for this because obviously Mahler's Fifth Symphony and the Adagietto is made so famous by Visconti. And I had seen it when I was an adolescent and had thought it was about a really creepy man. Yeah. Who had fetishized this young boy. Right. And I found it really disturbing on that level. And I went back and watched it again. Mm-hmm. And I was so moved by it, because of course it is about grief and it's about the loss of a child, and being as a parent of 4 kids, I just wept, and it's all about death. Yeah. And so watching it at this point in my life, that's when it's something, and it's an extraordinary movie, is that you remember it entirely differently and you can re-experience it again. So even though cinema feels like it's a finite object, it is so porous and a great film. And I think I can be objective about this because, you know, I knew this from the first minute that I opened the screenplay, is I think people will see Tar, if they haven't had the chance to see it yet or don't see it this year, they might see it in 5 years' time.
Yeah. Which would be really interesting. Actually, it would be very interesting to see this movie down, like Death in Venice, you know, Dirk Bogarde, what a performance.
He is one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, I mean, an amazing actor that could say so much without dialogue, just with his eyes and so much like that. There's actually a documentary out called Most Beautiful Boy in the World on that kid that was
really?
Yeah.
That's my next.
From last year. Got to check it out. Yeah. All of that. When, you know, there's all kinds of trivia about you and things. You were the first person to win
everything about me is trivia.
You're the first person to win an Oscar playing an Oscar winner, Katharine Hepburn.
Is that the small?
Yeah. You
small
actually have played
club?
on screen 2 Oscar winners, because Bob Dylan won for a song.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So
did he collect that one? He didn't collect his Nobel Prize.
No. you know, they send it to him.
Yeah.
But you know, it's an amazing kind of you know, a career in terms of those choices. But playing Katharine Hepburn, which I thought was brilliant, and you know, and then Blue Jasmine and everything else. For you, going through a season like this, where you're up for all these awards and Academy Awards, and you go through that. I saw you at the Critics' Choice Awards. I actually was sitting at your table, and I loved what you said in your speech about why don't we just like change the rules here and have everybody, because it's hard to differentiate between performances, and you were like sort of calling for a
I just speaking to everybody, and I just wonder. You know, it's so wonderful to celebrate the work of people, and I'm so grateful to the critics to having kept the conversation around Tar as open-ended as it has been, as open-ended as the film is, because of course you're so responsible often to how an audience arrives at a movie. You know, you set up sort of expectations, and so that I was so grateful for. But speaking to people, and all of these films that have come out of deep reflection during the pandemic, you feel there's so many films that are so wildly different in scale, in ambition, and execution. It's that how can we compare them? Right. You know, and none of us are Usain Bolt, where it's a definitive, you know, that we're the fastest or and I just think that we don't. Internally within the industry, we don't operate that way. You know, it's just amusing. But look, it's wonderful to be recognized by your peers, and particularly with a film like Tar, which felt like a really kind of dangerous, volatile undertaking. You know, it's great that a film as provocative of this has entered the mainstream in that way. I know. You know, but it's you know, they're so different. I do think actors are used to being. In particular, are used to the notion of ensemble rather than comparison.
Well, you've taken small roles, and you know, you have almost as many supporting nominations as you do lead. You know, and that's a thing in Britain. You know, the greatest actors always would take, you know, smaller parts if the part was there.
Yeah, you think. I mean, when Anna McKay called and said, "I'm making this film called Don't Look Up," would you play this character? She's you know, like a popular news presenter, and I said, sure. I didn't even have to read the script, and I'm a very small cog in a very big wheel, and it was so great to be part of that dialogue.
Hilarious.
Not only do you exercise different muscles as an actor, but you're part of a conversation, and maybe that's just from theatre. I don't think about the size of the part. I think about the potential, you know, of what this thing could be.
But that was a brilliantly played role. See, when I talk about small roles, you and Tyler Perry are on there. You're looking like you're right out of Fox News to me. You know, everything about it was so perfect. And when Leonardo DiCaprio's having a nervous breakdown on air, basically about the end of the world, you go like, you know, you do exactly what some of these people will do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Leo was amazing.
Yeah.
He's amazing in everything. He always puts like 110% in.
That's amazing. And then you get to work with the same year, Guillermo del Toro with Nightmare Alley, a wildly different kind of role. And that brings me to the other movie, which you may not know she's in, unless you're watching those credits we're talking about, Pinocchio.
Playing Spazzatura the monkey. I know. I love that when you're on set with a director like Guillermo, and we're saying, well, when are we going to work with one another again? And I'm playing this sort of femme fatale, and I said, and he said, I'm doing Pinocchio, and he said, Miles, have we cast the monkey yet? And he said, no. He said, you're Spazzatura. And so I went, okay. And so, I mean, it was just to be in the room with Guillermo again. Yeah. And what a beautiful film that is.
Isn't that movie
It's so special. And, you know, he's so hands-on. And, you know, given that Guillermo has come through the art department, like every single prop, every single offering that every single artisan brings to his film, he is so grateful for. You know, like he's someone who is able to speak to every single person with their particular craft language, and actors included. You know, he values everyone's contribution in the same way that Todd does, and I think it's reflected very much in the results of their the films that they make. They feel so owned by every single person on set,
which is great. Which you know, and you're all going to the Oscars, so that's proof positive.
We'll need an umbrella, I think, at this point.
Oh God, I hope not. Let's hope for the sun. But
Let's hope for some action on anthropogenic climate change. I think that would be that would be a start.
That would be.
Yeah.
Cate Blanchett, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for joining
Thank
us on
you.
the actor's side.
Thank you.
Thanks.